Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this is the Vedanta Series question and answer session. And so as usual, I'll mute my microphone just to see if there are any questions. Of course, there must be questions. If there are no questions, there are no answers. So please go ahead.
Swamiji, I have a question. I want to know this concept of Purusha and Prakriti and its relation to yoga and Vedanta.
Thank you.
Swami, I have another question. It's about work and contemplation, prayers and meditation. Since in the Bhagavad Gita it's written we have to work, and at the same time, the Swamis are always, they don't do anything. Not you, or I mean, they don't work. Like in Western countries, we are always working, and in the East they are like lazy. So, what do we have to do? Do we have to rest, or do we have to work? This is my question.
All right, so let me deal with these two questions. First, we are lazy monks, we don't do anything, and we don't work. But the Bhagavad Gita is orientated toward a number of things. First of all, most importantly, it is orientated toward renunciation. Sri Ramakrishna said, if you repeat Gita, 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 it comes out as Tyagi, Tyagi, Tyagi. That means kind of renunciation, but then what does renunciation mean? So we can explore these questions. Is it a contradiction in terms? And Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita brings this issue up himself. Don't forget, Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is immediately exhorting Arjuna to do his duty, which in his case is a military duty. Not all of us are military people. We have our own duty. And when that duty comprises spiritual life, then inevitably, in a way, it becomes meditative. I'll explore this later. Let me deal with the first question first. The term Purusha means a person. Originally, it was designated as a cosmic person. The whole universe was seen to be a person. That means whatever happens on the microcosm will have to happen on the macrocosm. The macrocosm has to be a small version of the microcosm and vice versa. What do I mean by this? When the ancient people were trying to explore what is the meaning of life, what is the truth behind everything, what is the constant thing that doesn't change, they also recognized the thing that changes, technically called Jagat. We can also, on exploration, call this Prakriti. Prakriti, the thing that is a little rough, the thing that is not smooth. Sanskriti, in comparison, is smooth, organized. Now, life does not work if it is not rough. That's a fact. And I'll give you the example I give many times. I once saw a documentary on the late Stephen Hawking, great physicist. And he, in our imagination, filled the whole of the Cambridge Hall, dining hall as it was, with ball bearings, small steel balls, closely packed. Then the question is, what will happen? So this I asked a group of people last Saturday in Plymouth. I gave them this example. What will happen? Nothing will happen. Absolutely nothing happen, because these ball bearings, these spheres are so tightly packed, there's no room for any movement. Even though there's a space between them, they are wedged together. So if the universe is like that, nothing will happen. When you take a few of the ball bearings out, things start shifting and shuffling around. And the universe is like that. It requires an upset in equilibrium. The universe in equilibrium is called Prakriti, nature, but it's the same Prakriti. Then when it goes out of equilibrium, becomes this whole world, and it's described as the whole of existence, all beings, from Brahma to a clump of grass. We can extend this example, just a conceptual example, to say, whatever we observe, the whole of the visible universe, and more particularly, the things that cannot be seen or cannot be understood, all of this comprises Prakriti, that we can loosely translate as nature. This more ancient term, Jagat, is a characteristic of it, that which never changes. And it can also be called Vriksha, that is a tree whose, when any tree can be cut down, should we cut down nature? Then a question arises. The answer immediately is no, we should not cut down nature. We should not withdraw from nature constantly in a state of meditation. And this generalization that Eastern monks sit there contemplating their proverbial navel is not true. The whole of monastic life in India, and we have to be careful what we mean by sannyasa, because sannyas, according to Bhagavad Gita, if that's what we're quoting, does not mean going off and becoming a monk. It means renouncing. Whether you're a monk, whether you're a householder, renunciation is necessary. What does renunciation mean? It means evaluating the world for what it is, the thing that changes, and not investing in it further than its functional use. Bearing in mind that there's one central purpose in life. That purpose is, for the devotee, a vision of God, and for the philosopher is the discovery of the thing that never changes, that is always constant, that was the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, that is outside the scope of time and space, that has no moving parts and no evolution in the temporal process. Now, we have no experience directly of anything like that, because all of our experience is derived through the sense organs. But the sense organs are still also part of nature. When we say nature and look out of the window and think of grass and flowers and trees and forests and mountains and streams, this is a misunderstanding. We have to include ourselves in nature. We have to include our physical composition, also made from organic parts. This body that we have, that we attach so much importance to, is nothing more than yesterday's bananas and milk. Is nothing more than just organic material magically transformed through an internal process, magical process. You put some potato in your mouth on one end, and you never suspect it becomes part of the human body. And if you're saying the human body is yourself, it becomes part of you. You can't really have something separate like that and think that it will always be a potato. Everybody understands this. Now, Purusha in distinction, contradistinction to this Prakriti, is something also that is the essential person. Just as in the human person, in the cosmic person, it's the same thing. According to Sankhya, which comes out as a psychology and a cosmology, the Sankhya and Yoga are twin philosophies. There are 6 approaches in the Indian system. That is the orthodox Indian system that acknowledges the authority of the Vedas. So all this knowledge comes from the Vedas, and the higher knowledge will come from the Upanishad portion of the Vedas. Now, there were some people who were confused about the structure. So let me go through the structure. I'm talking about the scriptural structure. What makes somebody orthodox in this fundamental home of Eastern thought that today we call Sanatana Dharma, or the Vedika religion, or Vedanta, has 6 approaches. What makes things orthodox is recognizing the authority of the Vedas. Sankhya and Yoga are twin philosophies. The Sankhya approach and the Yoga approach philosophically are both dualistic. But the final conclusion comes through non-dualism, sometimes called Vedanta also, just to confuse us. But you see, really, Vedanta has a final conclusion, and the final conclusion has to be arrived at through slow, progressive steps. Broadly, these steps are dualism, devotional. Most people are devotees. A love of God is the method. And so in this dualism, I am an entity that is prepared to let go, prepared to be carried by the divine, knowing that the divine is in control of the whole of nature, and nature is not separate from it. That non-separation is called qualified non-dualism, Vishishtadvaita, like fire and its capacity to burn, like a tree and a root. The root is not separate from the tree. And very often we find in the Kathopanishad and the Bhagavad Gita this expression of this tree, this Ashwata tree, whose roots are above and branches below. But the root is not separate from the tree. In fact, without the root, there's no tree. The root is Purusha. The tree is Prakriti. You can't make any separation. And then the final conclusion is this, that through a process of spiritual practice, the acknowledgement of the tree also goes, and only that root remains, only Purusha remains as a Purushottama, as a supreme Purusha. It's fundamentally in us, acts as a thinker, a witness, a knower. The whole purpose of any form of renunciation, that is, a valuation of nature, putting it in its correct perspective, and then dealing with it in a deeper way, all of this is called spiritual practice, whether it is in a dedicated monastic way or whether it is in a household way. Now, I can assure you that people in the Ramakrishna order, monks in the Ramakrishna order, are not passive. Swami Vivekananda designed an emblem, a logo for the entire Ramakrishna tradition or order, mission, mutt, monastery, comprising 4 approaches commensurate with the capacity of the mind. In the mind, we have the capacity to feel. In the mind, we have the capacity to evaluate and think and make decisions. In the mind, we have a willing capacity to act and to do. And the mind also has a capacity to be stabilized through a process of intense concentration called meditation. And so for this reason, Swami Vivekananda gives this wonderful emblem. If you go and look at the emblem, you'll discover that there is a rising sun over waters, that there is a swan swimming on it, and it is surrounded by a cobra. And at the bottom is a beautiful lotus flower being presented. Now, the lotus flower is symbolic of feeling, devotion, a path of devotion, but it's not devotion that is weakening. It is not a dependency kind of devotion. It is a deep connection with the divine. And for this reason, The idea of a lotus is presented because a lotus flower is eternally detached from the water. Its stem is in the water, but the flower itself is always out of the water. A detachment from the world by virtue of an attachment to the Supreme Beloved that we call the Lord. This Lord Ishvara is mentioned in the yoga philosophy, is mentioned in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras as part of the process of observances called niyama, consisting of purity of body, purity of mind, and also consisting of cultivating a contented attitude as a preliminary to meditation, as a way of stabilizing our behaviors and our habit levels. And then there is strengthening of will, we call this tapasya. Strengthening the will through control, self-control. And along with that would be a study, that is, a deepening inquiry into the nature of things. And part of that will be the use of japa. And finally, there would be surrendering all the fruits of your activities to what is described as Ishvara. So the yoga philosophy is going away from atheism that the Sankhya system has, only requiring Purusha. But what is this Purusha? This Purusha is your innermost quintessential self. And when you say Purusha, when you say Atman, you're really saying the same thing. Atman and Purusha are the same thing, it's just different terminology. Purusha is derived from two words, two Sanskrit roots. Puri, a city. Purna, that which is all-pervading and full. My name, Purnananda, you as the bliss of this fullness. Now, why should you combine these two terms and make Purusha? You see, in Kathopanishad and the Bhagavad Gita, there is this beautiful, beautiful image, this beautiful concept of, in the Kathopanishad case, Ekadashi Dharam, an 11-gated city. The body, in other words, is something like 11-gated city. For it to operate, for it to in any way have any kind of structure, rhythm, any kind of harmony within it, there must be a ruler of the city. And that ruler of the city, as we know, is Ajna, unborn, and also is its consciousness is unflickering. Our human consciousness, otherwise called the mind, is always flickering. It's always darting about. The world is always changing. Prakriti is always a state of flux or a state of equilibrium at the end of an era. Just as in our own drama, the same thing happens. First of all, the equilibrium is called a deep sleep. Nothing happens. Only a peace is there. There's no duality, no multiplicity. There's only one entity. We can call it peace. Get a peaceful sleep. But then you see from there, we get all the varying scenes. Unbelievably unusual scenes that can happen in a dream and ultimately a waking state. These three states of consciousness are an intrinsic part of the understanding of what is life and who are we. What is this thing called consciousness? It's not a fixed thing, but pure consciousness that remains awake while we sleep, that pervades it all and expresses itself in these three ways. This is called the eternal witness. It's also a knower, it's also a thinker. Now, supposing all of that goes away and disappears, supposing our spiritual practice is elevated to a tremendous height, supposing we're able to control the waking state of consciousness, supposing through that we're able to control the unconscious mind that sits beneath it, then at a certain point, through constant internal meditation, a certain level of poise habitually occurs, and we can call this superconsciousness, samadhi. In that point, there is no prakriti, There is no waking state. There's no dream. There's no dreamless sleep. Therefore, there's no witness. A witness is only there if there's something to witness. We can't call it a witness legitimately. In fact, we can't call it anything objective. But we know that it is pure existence. It is pure consciousness. And it is unending bliss. So its nature is described as Sat Chit Ananda. This Purusha and Prakriti, a separation of these two things, is the goal of yoga. And the yoga philosophy, their final chapter is on independence, or this isolation, this kaivalya, this constant separation. So all systems require discernment. All systems require this working, as it were, at this separation. Now, we mentioned that in the emblem, there is the flower, the lotus, representing both detachment from Prakriti and attachment to God. And here, if we personalize Purusha, we can call it Ishvara, we can call it God, we can call it the lover, we can call it the beloved, we can call it Vishnu, we can call it Shiva, we can call it Christ. These are names. We can even call it some term of endearment, where ultimately this closeness, this joy of devotion increases to ecstatic proportions. This is the path for most people. But you see, it has to be an integrated path. Since we are not exclusively feeling people, there's the sun shining over the waters, beaming. And this represents jnana. Jnana, jna, from the root to know. This represents the path of knowledge. What is this process? We have to view the world and revalue it as a permanent entity seeming to penetrate and flow through all aspects of this Prakriti and coming as this Prakriti and yet distinct from it, flowing through all parts, all hands, all heads, all eyes, all limbs, all trees, all flowers, all aspects of nature, all suns, all moons, all galaxies. And what is the process of it flowing? How do we acknowledge its flow? What makes it seem to be fragmented? It is the mind that seems to make it fragmented. And so we have to deal with this aspect called the mind. Meditation is intrinsically necessary for all paths. And this is represented by the cobra on the outside of it. And then we have the swan going through the waters. This is karma yoga. Karma yoga, the swan represents the individual jiva, that is this Purusha that is intrinsically mixed up, as it were, that by itself is pure, is pristine, is Purusha, but when mixed up with the body-mind complex and experiences and behaviors, we call this jiva. Jiva, the living thing that seems to be alive. And the central question even today is, what is life? This was a question asked by the scientist Erwin Schrödinger, and it came out as a book. His lectures were compiled, and he gave these lectures in the late 1930s here in Dublin. Very interesting book, a very thought-provoking book, but the question still remains, and you find physicists and biologists still debating this question: what is life? We're able to tell them what life is an animated thing on the basis of this all-penetrating entity, this entity that by itself is pure being and has the capacity to give us the impression of becoming, and that becoming aspect we call Prakriti, or the world. So what is the process that Swami Vivekananda is suggesting through this emblem? He's suggesting that we harmonize all these paths. It's not a new suggestion. The Bhagavad Gita has these 4 paths contained in it. So from the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita to the 5th chapter is contained the process or the path of karma. We have to act, and Krishna says, even if you resolve I won't act, you'll still have to do some basic things. You'll have to do walking, you'll have to do sitting, you'll have to do eating, you'll have to do cooking. Some process, some action you'll have to do. Is there some way, excuse me, of dealing with this action so it doesn't produce any disturbance in the mind? Problem is a psychological one, disturbance of the mind. We can't see the truth of the Purusha that sits there. And so any spiritual process is a psychological process. We have to deal with the mind. The mind is incessantly working while we ourselves are working. Controlling this mind is a difficult process because it comes from our habit of wandering and relating constantly to the external world. That creates a number of doubts, anxieties, fears, a number of deviations, all disturbances, essentially summarized as pain. You may not think that you're experiencing pain. And yet, you see, if you say, I'm happy right now, I have a house, I have a good bank account, my job is secure, my children are good, they're making progress, their studies are good, I have a loving wife or a loving husband, whatever it is, all right? Take any one of those factors away, even for a short period of time, what becomes of your happiness? It's all gone. It's as if the whole of your joy is stripped away completely. Imagine. And so essentially, we may well be in a denial of it, but we are all suffering. This is why we do this personality development course, because the cause of our suffering is that identification between Purusha and Prakriti that seems to mix things up. And we make this misidentification, we feel we are embodied. Therefore, anything that happens to the body will produce pain for us. We feel we are an individual personality. Therefore, anything that knocks our self-image becomes intrinsically overreactive in us. It becomes a painful thing. We start complaining, that person said this person said that. That gets compounded every hour, every day, maybe 3-4 days at a time, and the misery gets compounded until ultimately we say, let me go and see a psychologist or psychiatrist. I seem to have a problem, not knowing that internal to us is Purusha, the thing that is an indwell of a city, but lest we think it's confined, lest we think it's restricted, is also Purna, that is all-pervasive, full. You can't get more than fullness. It is always full and free. So as we always say, this in business circles, you see, they say, a catchphrase, be an optimist. What is an optimist? Well, an optimist says, my glass is half full. A pessimist says, my glass is half empty. We in Vedanta say, no. People of wisdom would say, my glass is full, always full and overflowing. There's no half anything. It's always bubbling over. Everything is full and free and perfect. Why can't we see it? Because we don't see it, we don't look at it from the higher spiritual perspective. We don't sit on the divine throne in a state of poise and calm, in a state of peace that passes all understanding, and beam from there. When you do that, things look different because automatically we have detached. So we are not saying be a lazy person. We're not saying be a highly overactive person. We are saying, please, whether you are a monk or a householder, give your life some work-life balance. And the balance is contained in proportions of jnana, proportions of bhakti, proportions of dhyana yoga, that is meditation, and a proportion of love, devotion, worship, devotional practicing the presence. We're not saying what your starting point is. That will be individual to you. Whatever is natural to you, you make your starting point. But we'll all cover the same ground eventually. And all of these components have to be in balance. Why? Supposing we are over-analytical. Supposing we decide that we are a purely thinking intellectual person doing intellectual gymnastics, reading lots of material, stuffing our head through with information, we'll become a dry intellectual. We'll become such a dry intellectual, we'll be completely out of touch with our feelings. Supposing we are an emotional person and not in any way intellectual, the very opposite, then we'll be ever analyzing our own feelings, inclined toward depression, poor me, trying to figure out what's wrong with me, what's wrong with me, what's wrong with the world, why don't people like me? And so naturally, an element of reasoning has to be there. And in religion, we can see what Swami Vivekananda calls howling fanatics everywhere. Why? Because there's no balance of reasoning. And this has to be balanced with activity. Everybody has to act regardless. But will you make this act sacred? Will you give it the same value and importance as you give worship, sandhya, puja, ritual? Will you enrich your ritual with meaning? So these are all components to enrich a spiritual life. And then will you be able to sit down with all these things in place? Sit down with an element of poise and calmness in a systematic way. Systematic means same time every day. Same time every day, creating a rhythm in your life, creating a stability. Meditation is essential for everybody, but we have to follow the essential steps. There are 20 clues, really, to enhance your meditation. I'll mention them briefly. First of all, make sure you find rest in meditation. Make sure that it's not a question of sitting and doing nothing. Make sure that you sit down in such a state that you are alert and yet relaxed. Make sure that you're not too tired to meditate. Make sure that if after a whole days of hard labor you feel sleepy at night and naturally find it impossible to meditate, then you should just take the divine name that possibly a guru has given you. If you haven't got such a mantra from a guru, then you will need to find one of your own. Om is the most common. Seek solitude within you. Even if you're sitting in a cave or a mountain scene with the whole of so-called nature around you, the solitude is actually within you. The solitude is the capacity to make the mind poised. Follow divine routine. Make sure that the routine, classically 4 times a day we should sit in dedicated meditation, morning, early morning, midday, late or evening as the sun goes down, and midnight. Now, if you can't do the midday and midnight, at least you can do twice daily. At least you can resolve that before eating any food, you will do this spiritual practice. And spiritual practice comprises prayer, meditation, and japa. Not necessarily in that order either. Make sure that every day you improve the quality of your meditation. It's not that you meditate the same each day. There has to be an intensification each day, an intensification of feeling each day. Forget about auspicious days. Ramakrishna, in his wisdom, maintained that auspicious days, or inauspicious days, I should put it that way, are only inauspicious if you believe in them. So very often I'm asked, oh, is this an auspicious day for well, you believe in auspiciousness? You believe in auspicious days and times and all that? If you do, then yes, this is inauspicious. If you don't believe in that, then every day is auspicious. Every second contains the fullness and glory of the divine. And then you see, make sure we have or make time for meditation. Make sure we're disciplined about it. Don't take on arguments that the mind brings up. Excuses. Oh, I didn't get enough sleep. I'll start again tomorrow. These are traps. We have to take sometimes a very harsh approach toward the mind. And then make sure that you have regular sleep. Make sure that sleep is not an issue, because if you are a good meditator, you don't require much sleep, I can assure you. A few hours only is necessary for deep meditators. And don't forget, during the day, while you're working, while you're active, this is a time of meditation with eyes open. You should still be meditating, but with eyes open. Everything that you see, every action that you do should be sanctified and should be done in the eternal now. Not the future, not the past. No regret of the past, no anticipation of the future. Catch this one precious moment which is here, which is now. It's full of all the divine glory that you want. Tune into the ever-present now. Try to have a fixed center of consciousness. Try to make sure, excuse me, that you, if you're following a tantric system, for example, that the heart is the starting point. Anything below that would not be suitable. Excuse me a second. Make sure that you control food. Spiritual practice, I often say, begins with food. Don't overeat, don't undereat, eat the right quantity, and make sure the food is pure. What does it mean by pure? Nothing to do with hygiene. It means that it is of sattvic vibrations. It is prepared with love. It is an offered food. It is prasad. Before you eat it, make sure it is offered, and at least when you eat it, make sure that Vaishvana, the Lord, divine Lord, who digests all your food, is invoked and thanked. Make sure that you are able to hold a posture, good posture. Select 2 sitting postures for meditation, so that if you tire in the one, if it becomes awkward, you're able to adopt the second one. In terms of pranayama, some rhythmic breathing may be necessary as a plan B, but unfortunately, the practice of it is dangerous in the case of the majority of people, this pranayama, because they can neither follow a regulated, quiet life, nor can they be under constant guidance of a qualified teacher. And I have come across this use of pranayama as a way of upsetting the nervous system tremendously, because their lifestyle did not match the rhythm that they're trying to achieve. There is a necessity for all of us to constantly remain alert. Sleep is not an option in spiritual practice to do with meditation or any other thing. If we get used to sleep and meditation together, we are forming a very bad habit. We have to be alert in all the things we do. The Bhagavad Gita gives us a beautiful definition of what is yoga. It tells us that it is equilibrium of mind and skill in action, these 2 things. That gives us a great clue about how we should go about our daily business. We go about our daily business with the maximum efficiency. And the only way we can do that is by concentrating on the present moment and putting all our awareness, all our mindfulness into the present moment. And the equilibrium of mind is done in several ways. It can be heightened. Equilibrium of mind means we do not do any actions in a future-orientated way, because that creates anxiety for us. Secondly, you can enrich this and deepen it by offering all actions mindfully to the Supreme Lord of the universe with love. Like any flower offering at a puja or any flower offering, even in secular human life, where we demonstrate our love for a person by giving flowers or a gift of some kind. May every activity in our waking life be a kind of intense offering, something that evokes tremendous love and feeling, on the basis that no activity is mine. The energy is not mine. At the very least, it's the solar energy. I can't claim anything. I don't digest my food consciously. It's all supplied for me. I don't renew cells. I don't adapt when things upset the body. You know, the human cell and any other organic cell has the capacity to adapt and change itself as a cooperative method. It is nothing random about it. The idea of the DNA being fixed and all change, including evolutionary change, is something due to random mutation, is now become a myth. Try to adjust to your environment. Try to be patient with it. Try to be accepting of it. Try to see it as a gift. Try to cultivate a definite attitude towards the divine. Try to learn to manipulate your own mind rather than the other way around. And always turn to God. For the majority of people are devotees. If you're in a difficult situation or problem, then the Lord of the universe is always with you. We can easily turn our mind to God. Do this by feeling the divine presence always and making use of a mantra or japa. Try to simplify your life. Try not to complicate it with too much analysis or too much activity. And try to be a true gentle person, gentleman or gentlewoman. Try to be kind and compassionate and friendly to everyone. That comes from within. Try to smile at everyone, not in a weird or sinister way, but a smile doesn't start from the face. A smile starts from the heart. Make it from the heart. Learn to be patient. Learn to synchronize with divine timing. Stop any kind of complaining, even a complaining mind, or hearing complaining from others. Stop them in their tracks and say, thank you. My mind is not a dumping ground for your complaining attitude. And change the subject to something more fruitful, more optimistic, more rewarding, more enriching, more encouraging. So these are some pointers on this inner life. Just to summarize a little bit. Purusha and Prakriti may be considered separate until the realization dawns that one is a manifestation or expression of the other. And finally, that only that one exists as a permanent reality. Secondly, no monk should be lazy or inactive. There are some schools which are maybe like that. I've come across some, particularly in Buddhism. But there's no doubt that from the Bhagavad Gita's point of view, when you become somebody of steady wisdom, in other words, when your spiritual attainment creates an equilibrium of mind, then you irresistibly have to work for the welfare of the world. Famously, when Swami Vivekananda asked his master, please give me this eternal samadhi, this nirvikalpa samadhi. Ramakrishna immediately rebukes and retorts, oh, I'm so disappointed. I thought you were much better than this. I thought you'd be like a grand banyan tree that would give shelter to the whole of humanity. Anybody who thinks that monks are lazy has not understood the teachings of Swami Vivekananda and has not understood his legacy, his monastic legacy. So with these few words, I'm going to take off the mic to see if there are any final questions and whether or not I have satisfied your questions with answers.
Swami, sorry for the word lazy, but I don't know how to tell it in English, so I don't want to criticize monks. So sorry. Thank you for your explanation. Okay, thank you very much.
No, like everybody else, people can be lazy, monks included. So we can take on board that word quite happily and be honest enough to, you see, every person has to appraise themselves as to whether laziness is dominating in the mind, or whether intense activity is dominating in the mind, or whether the mind is in a state of purity, happiness, and equilibrium. And it's like a gear, and all of us have to do it, monastic or otherwise. We have to assess the condition and try progressively to elevate the condition of the mind to a higher state, all the time to a higher state. This is a game of guiding thought that everybody has to play. Good.
Swamiji, thank you for explaining the Purusha and Prakriti, but I just have one more question on that.
Yes.
So if one is the manifestation of the other, then is it true to say that both will exist for eternity? Because is it true that Purusha can do nothing without Prakriti?
No, it's not true to say Purusha can do nothing without Prakriti, but Prakriti cannot operate without Purusha. So, yeah, Purusha is not dependent on anything. Purusha is the embodiment of perfection and freedom, is the essence, not embodiment, is the essence of perfection and freedom. Prakriti does not operate without Purusha. It's like a kind of electrical current, The coils are required. Without the coils, there's no electrical current. Without the presence of an electromagnetic wave system, there is no electricity. So Purusha is never dependent. Now, is it true to say that Prakriti is eternal? Yes, from this point of view. Prakriti overall is a cosmic duplication of our own play, our own drama, bodily drama. So supposing we see this human body as a kind of mini universe, then this body goes into 3 states. It is a waking active state. We stop there and elevate it to the cosmic level, spinning galaxies, crashing into each other or isolating each other, even atoms at that level, resisting the pull of a central proton, or separate protons resisting the pull of other protons or gathering themselves in a gravity way and radiating from there. Highly active process. But this process comes at different energy levels. When all of that, after a series of cycles, goes back into what we call a cosmic dreamless sleep. Human being is the same thing. We go through all this drama and end up in a deep sleep, but we re-emerge from it in a waking state. In this same way, the whole universe goes into a state of laya, a state of potentiality, a cosmic deep sleep, but re-emerges, not in our human time, after eons and eons. So this is the series of time that is determined in cycles, kalpas, ages, yugas, etc. So the whole thing goes back into its primordial state. Now, either in one go or in bits and pieces, in localized versions. So we can't say that it happens in one go. That's one school of thought. Another school of thought is it happens in pockets. Personally, Swami Vivekananda, personally, I go along with Swami Vivekananda. He thought it was more in local pockets. And I think there's physical evidence for it as well. So, but it is eternal. It will eternally go on. The drama will
Yeah.
eternally go on. Fortunately for us, it'll go on, because it
Yes.
means we have unlimited opportunities to pass our university exams. And so what it means is if we don't get it in this life, then it comes up in the next life and so on.
Yes.
You see, reincarnation is reincarnation of foolishness. This we have to understand. And the reincarnation, as it were, of nature itself is a reincarnation of what is called Maya. Now, Prakriti, in its potentiality, is what we call God, Ishvara. And when it manifests, when its equilibrium is upset, so that only pure sattva dominates, we call this cosmic mind. Cosmic mind, often theologically, I should say, is called Brahma. Philosophically called Hiranyagarbha, a golden womb from which everything else comes. And devotionally, what we call the first audial movement, the first Shabda Brahma, which is called Om. That Shabda Brahman comes out as Om. And from there, all the other vibrations occur. And what is the usefulness of this Prakriti is because our spiritual journey is going back to more and more subtle vibrations that we call Mahabhutas or Tanmatras, till we get to cosmic mind, the personal God. We can call this the cosmic Krishna, or the cosmic Buddha, or the cosmic Ram Krishna, or the cosmic Christ. Going back there, that's the personal God. Now, for the devotee, that's all you need go to. You don't need to go any further, because that automatically glides into the universal aspect that Vedanta actually calls Brahman. So on the individual level, we call this Purusha. On the cosmic level, we call it cosmic person. But when we go to describing this without its manifestation, we have to go to the term Brahman, the absolute. And so we can use this language. This is Nirguna Brahman. Nirguna Brahman, without any variation, bondage, quality, manifestation. And then that manifests to Saguna Brahman. And Saguna Brahman is Prakriti. That's Saguna Brahman without, which is with qualities, because that Prakriti contains these three evolutionary forces or components, namely Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. In physics, we call this Tamas inertia. We call this Rajas electrical energy. We call this Sattva gravitational pull or gravitational energy. Something wants to unite everything. Something wants to fragment everything. And something doesn't want to move at all. And it comes out in the human mind exactly the same, but psychologically so. Tamas comes out as laziness of mind, lack of enthusiasm, ignorance, darkness. And it comes out in the expression as egocentric activity to do with my own self-interests. And Sattva has no characteristic of egoism. It is purely purity itself. It is all the noble qualities we can gather. It is of the nature of illumination. It is through this means, through these three gunas, these essential components, as it were, of Maya. Why are they components of Maya? Because we cannot see the truth directly until we have gotten a proportion of wisdom that immediately illuminates the truth for us. And the example given, of course, is threefold, but the typical example is, in the twilight of the day, I go out and I look in the corner, something coiled up, and I immediately project onto it the image. It is a snake, it's a dangerous snake, and then concern and worry comes in. Maybe it'll bite me. Maybe I should run away from it. Maybe I should attack it and get rid of it. Or maybe I should see properly and confirm its existence. Or maybe I should just yield to it, stand mesmerized. So my inner wisdom shows it for what it is. It shines the light of wisdom on it. And in shining the light of wisdom, I have it revealed it is a rope coiled up, not a snake at all. I superimpose a snake on it. This is called Maya. So what are the components of this Maya, this misunderstanding? Well, first of all, the rope was hidden to me. The snake was projected to me. And Sattva, the illumination of wisdom, revealed it for what it was. And because it's coiled up, because it resembles a snake and a snake resembles it, there are signatures within the world that we can see. They give us clues as to the real nature of pure existence. So that theologically, when we talk of the creator, Brahma the creator, this is Rajas. The creator projects the world for us. Vishnu tries to maintain and preserve its status, keeps everything in balance, called Sattva. And Shiva wants to keep everything in darkness. He wants to destroy. That's one way of looking at it. Of course, another way of looking at it is each one of these contains the fullness, so that Shiva can be the destroyer of our ignorance, that Vishnu can be the revealer through our careful observation of the glory of Prakriti or nature. And it can be a sattva in that sense. And when we see the projection of Brahma, we can glory at it, because you cannot have a projection called life without the other end of it, which is called death. So I often say, with a twinkle in my eye a little bit, what is the prerequisite for death? Well, it must be birth. Then what is the prerequisite for birth? It must be death. This continues in a cycle. The cosmic drama of this cycle is what Prakriti also does. There is an equilibrium in it, there's a projection in it, there's a dissolution in it, but it is always there eternally. That is what Sankhyas and Yogas believe, and everybody else believes that, because they adopt two things. They adopt the cosmology and the psychology of the Sankhya system. It comes through as yoga as well. The other darshanas, just for information's sake, we can mention them. So there's Sankhya, there's Yoga, these are the two. There is Uttarimamamsa, which is otherwise called Vedanta. And there is the Mamamsa, which is to do with rituals. And there is Vaisheshika, which is to do with atomic theory. And there is Naya, which is really to do with logic. These are the 6 darshanas in our classical Sanatana Dharma. Right, okay, so thanks. We'll finish off with that. Enjoy the rest of your sunny weekend. So, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you. Peace be unto all. And I just have to mention before departing finally, the ashram is fully open, as you may know. And there's no substitute for an actual visit to the ashram, where you can enjoy the company of foolish people like me, whatever it is, and enjoy the company of Ramakrishna here. It's a divine place, it's a holy place. So I welcome you all to continue all our programs physically and live, and get the darshan which is available at this ashram. So I thank you.